Hold on one second. My alarm clock is going off. And we're live. So, James, you have to entertain everybody for 1 second. So, it is the kickoff because my alarm now says it's 8 o'clock.
Well, I mean, that's the good sign, right? That we are ready to go. We're up and awake and early on a Wednesday morning, a special morning, Veterans Day.
Yes, and a happy Veterans Day, even though you're Air Force.
Well, back to you. It's a good day for all who served and to honor this country and those who stepped up to the plate. You know, not everybody can do that. Not everybody does that. And so, I mean, I didn't serve in wartime or anything, you know, fancy, but I was proud to serve, and even more so today. I'm looking back, I was a kid, you know, but I'm glad that I did it.
No, definitely, James. I appreciate your service. And my Army joke, whenever the Air Force birthday comes up, I'm like, we call that the day the Air Force got kicked out of the Army Day.
Yeah, I'm a Southerner. We call it Independence Day. So
it's super terrific to have you on the show today.
Yeah.
For our audience out there, I'm Amy Hamilton, author of The Consummate Communicator, Character Traits of True Professionals, and the project manager, Life is a Project. And the reason that these books actually came into fruition and became what they are is really because of James and his amazing efforts. So I wanted to feature James's work today in honor of Veterans Day. So several of the authors throughout the day, they were published through Free Agent Press, which is James's agency. And I want to give James a chance this morning to really talk about his books, his work, and what he has to offer you. And then James is also going to close out our session of 24 authors in 12 hours. And we're going to talk a little bit about my books. But this whole session right now, I really want to focus on you, James. So how did you first get into writing and self-publishing?
Well, far back as I can remember, I wanted to write a book, right? It's just one of those things. I just loved books. My family, you know, my grandmother loved books. My mom loved books. And so I just loved books and I wanted to be a part of it. Now, again, you have to factor in that this was pre-internet. So had I grown up today, I probably would have loved Fortnite. But I love books. I love TV too, but I always loved books and stories and things like that. And so I wrote my first book in the 3rd grade. And so this is it.
Aww.
And it was just this little formula book that we did as a class project, but I illustrated it, I wrote it, the whole 9 yards. And it was this thing I was just really proud of. And then I didn't write anymore. As far as writing books, I got into publishing. I got into the newspaper in junior high and then high school. In college, I worked on the yearbook. Then I joined the Air Force, and you know, I didn't have time for those kind of things. I was a computer science officer. I wasn't, I wasn't an English major like I wanted to be. When the Air Force gives you money to get your degree, they get to tell you what degree to get. So, but this thing just was still there. It was lingering. And so it took a while. But 30 years after the first book, my second book came out. And it was a 3-year journey of writing Conquer the Entrepreneur's Kryptonite. And, it was just this labor of, I have to do this. It was like, you know, in the movies where, you know, the hero has this like burden that they have to unload, and it's difficult and it's hard, and they go through that journey to bring it to life. And so for me, that was what this was. It started with an idea about a strategic planning process and how to explain that in a way that wasn't complicated, and to help people develop a strategic plan, whether for their business or their life or whatever. And so this framework that a friend of mine had come up with, I kind of refined and made my own. And with his blessing, wrote the book, and it took 3 years. It took 3 years to write it. A lot of procrastination, a lot of just struggle and angst and imposter syndrome. You know, who am I to do this? But it came out and sold some copies. Not a New York Times bestseller, but it sold enough copies that I was happy. And then
I'm putting your link into the chat right now, by the way, so that people can order your book from Amazon.
Great. So that started this journey into publishing, which I did not expect. So the whole book that started my entire accidental publishing journey was a book on planning, and I didn't plan this. But sometimes, you know, things happen and you have to kind of run with it, because good stuff can happen on the fly. And so I did a good job with the book. People started asking me for help with the book, and that turned into now more than 200 book projects I've worked on since. So that was 7.5 years ago. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I got to meet you. I got to meet a lot of the authors that you're going to be talking with today. It's been a really fun journey getting into publishing. And it all kind of rekindled back to things from school when I was in journalism and when I wrote that little snake book. So there you go.
So, James, why don't you tell us a little bit more about, first of all, your book. You mentioned it's a planning book, and it has a very interesting title. You called it The Entrepreneur's Kryptonite. So what exactly is the entrepreneur's kryptonite? Or is that just the spoiler that gives away the whole point of reading the book?
No spoilers there. It's the concept of, there's so many people who want to be an entrepreneur, and whether that is an entrepreneurial mindset within a job, or it's, I want to start a business, or you've started a business and it's struggling. And for me, the entrepreneur's kryptonite was always about the idea and germinating that and bringing it to life. And for me, so much of that is around having a strategic plan. It's around having this master plan that you can then go and implement. But when I was growing up, and even when I was in the military, I didn't think of myself as strategic. Strategy to me was these giant binders on a shelf that dealt with any contingency. The Russians are coming, the Chinese coming, the North Koreans are coming, whatever it might be. And somebody in the Pentagon pulls down this binder and says, okay, this is what we do. And yes, there's value in those kinds of plans. But for the entrepreneur, it needs to be executable. It needs to be quick. It needs to be nimble, and it needs to be personalized. And the number one thing is it can't sit on a shelf. It has to be an active plan within the business. And so the book walks you through a process to develop kind of what I call the circle. It's right. The entire plan from beginning to end, and then you just slice it in half. You just create action. It's like you're creating an egg, and then you're bringing it to life. And that was kind of the whole concept. And so it broke down the process of developing a strategic plan, thinking 3 to 5 years out, thinking 1 year out, thinking 90 days out, and creating alignment between all the parts of your plan, your mission and your values and your purpose, to the actions and the projects that you're going to be taking on in the next 90 days that get you to the 1 year goal, that get you to the 3 to 5 year goal, and then just rinse and repeat. It's the cycle that you have to stay on top of. It's an active planning process instead of being something that you plan and mark out and then put on a shelf and look at it 5 years later and see if it worked out.
So one of the reasons we're doing this right now, this kind of virtual book festival feel, is because we can't go out in physical space right now. And COVID has really changed dynamics. And I was supposed to, originally my book was going to come out much earlier. And we were just sort of like, it doesn't matter when it comes out. Like, we'll just wait till COVID is over. And this mindset of like, you'll do these physical book signings, go to some indie coffee shops and things like that. And instead, now we are in this virtual space. We're talking, we're trying other avenues. What is your advice to entrepreneurs out there right now who are maybe struggling a little bit during COVID and looking for different avenues? What is your advice to that?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a really interesting year for me, a struggle year in a lot of ways. I think the number one thing first off is you have to kind of, hopefully you have some level of a mission and a purpose. If you don't, you've got to figure that one out. I struggled with that this year personally. It's been a tough year. I've been through a lot of changes, a lot of family things. My family's got a lot of very deep personal health issues. So COVID is something that, whether you believe in it or not, it's something we had to take seriously. And so we've taken it very seriously. The lockdown has been pretty hard at our house for the last 8-9 months. But you have to get up every day. You have to get out of bed. You have to go through your morning routine, whether that's exercise, a shower, or whatever it is, a cup of coffee. Go through a little bit of a routine and get up every day and keep going. And I plowed through this year. There were times that were really, really, really tough. But there's an upswing too, and there's good moments too. And as I look back on this year, I see, for the guy that's purposeful and strategic and wrote this book, I see a lot of wasted time. I see a lot of this contemplation and trying to figure out, what do I really want to be doing? How does that fit in with COVID and the way the world is now? And how long is that going to last? We just went through 2 hurricanes here. I live in Mobile, Alabama on the Gulf Coast. And my son was asking me after the first one, what if we lose power for a week? I said, well, if we lose power for a week, then maybe we go visit grandma, right? But the problem is we don't know if we're going to lose power. We don't know if we're going to lose power for a week or a day or 2 weeks. It's unknown. There's not a finish line that's known. And that's the same way that COVID is. We thought it was going to be 2 or 3 weeks of lockdown back in March. And here we are in November, and we see the roller coaster wave of cases, and it's different in different parts of the world, different parts of the country. And we have to deal with that. There's not a finish line. And I think with something like COVID, we will look back and say, oh, that's when it was over. We won't really know when that happened. But the point is that these things without finish lines, these undefined projects, you're a project manager too, like me.
Exactly.
When there's not an end date, it's really hard. We struggle with it. It's like The Infinite Game that Simon Sinek wrote last year. I read that, great book. It's hard when there's undefined things. But, we went through military training. There's a finish line at some point, right? And so you just brace yourself for the finish line. And sometimes you don't know exactly when that's going to be, but you know that the pain and the suffering or the whatever is going to come to an end, and you get through it. So the military mindset, you get a little bit of, strength through things that are weird like this. When you don't know the finish line, it's hard. And you have to have this kind of just one day at a time mentality. Admiral Stockdale talked about that. I believe in Good to Great, he was interviewed about how the guys that didn't make it in the POW camps were the optimists. They were the ones that said, we'll be home by Easter. We'll be home by 4th of July. We'll be home by Thanksgiving. We'll be home by Christmas. And it just ate away at their spirit over that time with disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. It was the realists and the pessimists that got through. They just knew that they had to endure. And we have to kind of find that strength, whether you call it the American spirit or whatever. You have to find that strength we can get through this. We didn't know how long World War II was going to last. We didn't know how long, any of these conflicts and things like this are going to last. And so this is kind of our battle to fight right now. And it applies to everything else. But it should make now that entrepreneurial journey or that personal journey, whatever it is that you're on, easier. Because if you build a plan and you set some deadlines, milestones along the way, you can have a finish line because you get to decide when the finish line is. Makes that a whole lot easier than fighting COVID.
Thank you so much for sharing that, James. We're about halfway through our interview, and one of the things that I wanted to make sure everybody knew out there is for the entire day, my 2 books, The Project Manager, Life is a Project, which James did the forward for. Thank you, James. And The Consummate Communicator, Character Traits of True Professionals, which Admiral James Stavridis, retired, did the forward for, are available free for Kindle download all day. And if you buy a print copy, 10% of all proceeds from print copies will be going to the Wounded Warrior Foundation. Strong supporters of the Wounded Warrior Foundation, and really just in honor of Veterans Day, supporting that cause. And James, did you have any promotions or anything you wanted to talk about today?
Nothing too specific. I tried to come up with something that I thought would be really good, but it was either too big or too meaningless. So what I'll do is, if you go to my website, freeagentpress.com, a couple of things. If you sign up for the newsletter, say by the end of the month, I'll send you a free copy of my second book, the digital version, Challenge Accepted, which is about goals and having an intentionality in your life. So this was a result of the years I spent writing the book. I wrote my second book. So just sign up for the newsletter. I don't do a lot with the newsletter, but I'll send you a copy of a download link for the book. And then if you sign up, if you want to talk about your book, if you've got a book in process or it's almost done, or you've got something, an idea, and you just want to talk about what the process looks like to write a book, to publish a book, if you go to freeagentpress.com/talk, you can schedule a free one-on-one session with me. And I'll be happy to do that, to just talk through your book and your process and give you some advice. It's not a sales call, it's a help call. And if later we decide to develop a business relationship, we'll go through that. And then if you go to /contact, you can fill out an actual form and tell me about your book and the details if you want to touch base and get more info. So happy to serve however I can. I really run this business as a service mentality. I don't do big time sales and processes and all those things. I just connect with people, and I love books and I love helping authors bring their books to life, as you'll see probably throughout the day as you talk to so many of the people I've worked with. And I hope they have good things to say. I think they will.
So, James, why don't we talk about this a little bit during the kind of second part of our segment, which is, let's talk about your business and let's talk about how you have been able to help over 200 authors.
Yeah, well, it's not 200 authors; it's 200 books because that's
200 books.
some people like you that have multiple books. So
Oh, that's right.
it's
It's
a,
this whole math thing.
it's a whole thing. But yeah, I mean, so my business, like I said, it kind of started as an accident, at least the current iteration of it. So I started back. I mean, I've always had kind of an entrepreneurial mindset. I just didn't know what that was because I grew up in the military. My dad was a chief master sergeant in the Air Force. My grandfather was a tech sergeant. I have a long, military history. Uncles and all kinds of people, aunts too, that were in the military. And so it was just this thing that I didn't know what it was. It was just something inside me. So I started out, I made a NASCAR website, and that was fun. I was trying to find an outlet for writing again, and that was at the turn of the millennium, right? And that turned into something for a few years. I had some fun with that, but I didn't really know what it was in terms of a business. And later, I started designing websites because I had the computer science background, project management background, so that was fun. And that turned into coaching. So I was doing some financial coaching, teaching Dave Ramsey classes, and I thought, well, I love doing this. This is what I'll do.
And part of a few of the authors that you've published have done some financial books that we'll be talking about later.
Yeah. And so that didn't really work out in terms of revenue. So I switched and thought I'd get into career coaching with my friend Dan Miller, and who I learned about from Dave Ramsey. So all these connections started to get made. That led me to getting involved in a group called Free Agent Academy, which is kind of where I stole the name for Free Agent Press from Dan's son, Kevin. So I was a big part of that organization for 5 years. And that's where it really started to take off. And I realized the strategic bent in me, and that's where the book was born. And then that turned into the business and publishing. So it's this journey. You kind of have to. I always say, whenever you have tough times, if you load a shotgun full of seeds and you shoot it in the ground, you'll eat what grows. And so you've got to plant a lot of seeds out there, try a lot of things sometimes before you know what's going to stick. But whenever you find something that sticks, water it, feed it, nurture it, and it can turn into something. And that's what Free Agent Press has been. It's one of many entrepreneurial kind of ventures that I've tried, and it's the one that stuck the best, probably because I have the passion for it, the skill set for it, and then I can connect with people like you, and it's just like we have this conversation. It's like, yeah, we're both on fire for this book. Let's get it done. Let's make it beautiful. And so that's kind of the secret of success, if you will, in my business. It's not a big business. It's a lot of fun. Enjoying doing it and growing it over time. It's turning into something, and hopefully it turns into a movement. And there's thousands of books and authors in the future. But right now, I'm just having fun doing it.
So, James, what can you what offerings do you have? What services do you offer the new authors? I know what I went through, but I kind of like you to share the different things. I know that some things we're having up today, one of them really just absolutely gorgeous. I think I have it over here right now, actually, is a children's book that you did with one of our authors, which is just fantastic for those of you out there in the audience. And I mean, when you look at this book, you don't see the word self-published here. This is a book that you're just like, you want to get this on the shelves. And then you have some really great books here that are, much more like your traditional, like Get Picked and How to Live. And so when I look at these books, I see these as just, when you see these on the shelf, these are not books where you go, there's a lot of typos or the artwork doesn't look right. Can you go into what services you can offer these different authors out there?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for me in my first book, it was all about, I want this to look as good as something published by Random House or Penguin or, the big names, right, in publishing. And now I can look back 7.5 years ago and say, I did a good job, but it wasn't as good as I could do today. So I kind of cringe when I look at my own books because they were very early in the process. But these other books, the examples that you held up, I do everything from after editing to getting it published. I know editors and proofreaders, so I can connect people. You're going to talk to Jennifer Harshman later today, I believe.
Yes.
She is my editor. She is the
So Jennifer had a tornado yesterday. So it is just like between the hurricanes and the tornadoes out there, I'm like, what is going on?
Goodness. Well, I hope she's okay and can still make it today and evering's on
yeah,
fire.
She was without power quite a bit yesterday, but it looks like everything's going to be fine, and we've been back in contact. But I was like, oh my gosh.
I have to reach out. So, but I don't do it. I could probably do editing because I'm OCD enough to do it, but I double question, triple question myself every comma. It's like, does it go there or not? So Jennifer's the expert there, and I just hand off stuff to her, and so I can connect authors with those services. I do, ghostwriting. I do the design of both the covers, the interior, the ebook. I've recorded audiobooks. I've got an audio editor, Brett Farmer, that I use, podcastconduit.com. I've all the design aspects, and then all the setup and project management. So sometimes these book projects can be pretty complicated, and they do need an experienced hand at the wheel to get them over the finish line. And then all of the setup with Ingram Spark, with KDP or others, so that you have print-ready files that really are beautiful and fit the design motif, if you will, of the professional industry. What I call it is kind of like the CIA. Book design is about all the things that you don't see. It's about the margins and the spacing and the font size, and those design elements. You don't notice them a lot of times unless they're wrong, unless they're bad. I mean, there are beautiful book designs in and of themselves, but most of them are about being invisible, so that the content comes to the front, and it's like sitting in a movie theater and it's your favorite movie. I remember when I watched Avengers Endgame, I was so into it. I was in the movie, I was suiting up with Iron Man, but if a phone had gone off in the movie or a baby started crying, I would have instantly been back in the theater. And to me, that's the experience I want people to have when they read a book, is they want them to be in the book and not see something, whether it's a typo or an ugly design element, that takes them out of that world that they're in. And that to me is what good book design does. That's pretty much where I stop, is getting it published and making it beautiful. I do some author coaching to help them get their books done or to help them launch. But I don't do book promotion. I'm not a marketer. So there's people that do that really well, and that's not me. But everything in between, I'm raring to go and help people produce a beautiful book.
James, you've definitely produced some beautiful books, and I have a whole stack of them here today. And there's something to me, and don't get me wrong, I love my Kindle, and especially if I'm on a plane, that's what I want, But when you can look at a book like this, and you think about giving this book to a child, this is a work of art. This is something that this kid can then have as they grow up, and it's the kind of book that you can say, oh, this is my favorite book as a child, and pass it down to your own children. So just phenomenal work that you do. And we're getting close to the end of this segment. So what I really want to do is, first of all, just a reminder to the audience, if you have any questions throughout, please go to this. I've put the links in for James's books. If you have a question about his books or how to get to Free Agent Press, the ticker is going across the bottom right now. So I want you to be able to reach out to James. And this whole segment today, so much of it is because we can't go out. We can't go to the book fair and pick up the book. So it's like getting to know the authors, getting to know their books, getting to know the behind the scenes. So if you could give any advice out there to an author who is maybe struggling, as you're aware, November is Write Your Novel month. It's a 50,000 word challenge for the month of November. What's your advice to people out there right now who are just trying to break into this and get over their writing blocks and hurdles?
I'm not the best example of a productive writer. So when I wrote Conquer the Entrepreneur's Kryptonite, I was traveling as a consultant at the time. And so I'd be flying across the country, and it was those 4 or 5 hour flights that were my zone times. I'd sit in the plane with my laptop and I'd write 8,000 words. And it was just amazing. It would just flow, because in this busy world we have, I could turn everything off. There was no Wi-Fi back then on the planes. If there was, it was expensive, right? And I could just sit there, and thankfully I was frequent flyer at the time, so sometimes it was first class, but I could just sit there with my headphones in, listening to music and writing, and just writing and just writing. And I remember 2 different flights, 6,000 words, 8,000 words, and the book was 40,000 words. So I wrote almost half the book on planes. It's hard. You have to find your best way of writing. And so for me, what worked was I taught classes. And so I had the recordings of those, and I would listen to them, and I would take notes as I went. And because I had most of the content right there, I had to get it out of my head onto the screen. Other people do whatever works. If you stone tablet or writing by hand and then having transcribed or whatever it is, just do that, because you can't help somebody if it's in your head. You've got to get it out there.
And James, I would add one thing to that, which as an author and blog posts, everything I do is like pretty crazy, is when you have that idea, even if it is late at night, record it in your phone, write it down, do something, because then you go, oh, I had this idea, and you can't quite get it back. And it can be very, very frustrating, especially if it's like a tagline or something punchy. Just take that extra second to write that down so it's not just eating away at you.
Yeah, my notes app in my phone has about probably 20 or 30 book titles or concepts that I write out, or I'll have a dream and I'll capture it, and it's in my phone. And a lot of times I never go back to it, but I've captured it so I don't lose it. My challenge right now is I have a massive fiction book concept that I love the idea. I have no idea how to bring it to life. So I'm chewing on that myself, and whether it's worth the time investment, but it could be, it could be my Game of Thrones, my Lord of the Rings, if I can figure out how to get it out of here and onto the page. So I will be tackling that at some point, but I'm a nonfiction guy. Most of the books I design are nonfiction. Most of the words that I write are nonfiction. Doing a children's book was a lot of fun. You pointed out that one. Amazing illustrator for that book, and it's a different challenge than the other books, but I'm always excited about those. I can't wait to do a cookbook, or something different, because it's just fun to tackle those challenges as a designer. But it's always fun to work with people who have a passion for their book and helping to bring it to life.
So James, your book idea just made me think about one of the authors today, not one of yours, but a Air Force veteran as well, Michael Sloan. And he wrote a young adult book. It's very much, I call it kind of like Narnia meets Harry Potter. And he wrote it while in Afghanistan. And so just really super looking forward to that. You have so many great features. And I'm so lucky because I want to keep talking to you. And I'm like, but wait, spoiler alert, James is going to be back at 7:30. James and I are going to have a very different kind of talk. And it's going to be almost like a reverse interview. And I'm going to get a chance to talk about my books and my work with James. James, it has been so fantastic having you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you, Amy. I have loved working with you. I have one of your books here with me, Project Manager, and just have fun today. This is a hard journey of 12 hours of just broadcasting. I will see you at the end of it, and I probably won't look as tired as you will.
Hopefully I look good. I got a lot of makeup on.
You're gonna have a whole lot of fun today, way more fun than I am. So say hi to all my friends, and I'll be tuning in when I can throughout the day to listen in. I'm excited for you and for all those authors to promote their books and their stories.
Perfect. And everything will be broadcast on Facebook Live, on Amy S. Hamilton PMP, as well as my YouTube channel. So if people don't have Facebook, direct them to that. So check it out. And then the recordings will be there forever. So thank you so much, James.
Thank you, Amy. Bye.